Good evening, Belmont and the world, whoever is watching our pre-Shavuot evening learning time, inspiration, potentially, as we can discuss some divrei Torah, some words of Torah to help to prepare us for the upcoming festival of Shavuot. Before we do so, I just want to, on behalf of Lisa, of course, Racheli, and our girls, on behalf of really the whole family, to thank you for joining us last night, for your beautiful messages, your heartfelt words to us both before, during, and after. Since I didn't realize making a bat mitzvah would actually be so exhausting. Definitely not complaining. It's been a whirlwind. It has been remarkable, wonderful, and it's really been very powerful to have a simcha during what has been a very difficult time, and we just appreciate that. We thank Hashem so much for everything that He has given us, and I just wanted to be able to thank you as well for joining us in our simcha. I think back to now, literally 12 years ago. So it was really about, looking at the time, it's about now that Racheli was born, just before the sun was setting, the last hour or two before the day. It was Shabbat afternoon in Shari Tzedek. She was born, actually, she wasn't so well, and they rushed her to what was called the Pagiyah, which is the sort of the intensive care for brand new babies. And she spent a couple of days there. We weren't really sure what was happening. I think they were just being overly cautious in the end, but our bundle of joy just wanted a little bit more time to get ready to meet her parents properly. But that was the Saturday evening, and then Shavuot was starting on the Sunday night, and Lisa was still in hospital through after Shavuot. I remember spending Shavuot sleeping on the floor of my yeshiva, which was not far from the hospital, and it was again a whirlwind, and it was emotional, and really the last couple of days have brought it all back. So it's perfect for Shavuot now, because I feel so connected to Shavuot and Racheli together, because she was born so close to it. I was running backwards and forwards to the hospital on Shavuot, and it's an emotional experience, and last night really brought it all back. And just wanted to say once again, thank you for joining us. Also, now moving more focused back to Belmont, for those of you that have been involved, I think we have had 73 participants in our Zman Toratenu, in our learning program that we launched it just before COVID. We launched it really the few days before Purim, and we encouraged our community to sign up. Every single parasha, every single one of the sidrot was not allocated, it was available. We asked people to sign up, put your name or your family name by a parasha, and commit yourself over the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot to read, to learn, to try and look for insights. Minimally just read it in English, but if not, try and translate it, or just try and read some articles, and we gave loads of resources, and it's been a community project. 73 people have been involved in it, and hopefully, if you haven't quite finished yet, you've still got another 24 hours, but hopefully we've all finished our sidrot, our parasha. And the emails that have been coming forward to me from people that have never really engaged in such a project, but as a community, as the Belmont community, we have completed the Torah in time for the giving of the Torah, or the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. It's a very special thing, and it's been wonderful for COVID, if you can say such a thing, because this was always a project that we would be doing on our own or within our own families, not needing to be in shul or part of the community to actually do my bit. We were supposed to be celebrating tomorrow night, first night of Shavuot at Tikkun Leil, with everyone together for a siyum, for a concluding meal. We can't quite do that, obviously. So we're going to celebrate this a week from tonight, 8 o'clock. Even if you haven't joined in the program, please do join us, 8 o'clock. Words of bracha from Chief Rabbi Mervis, and a few of our participants will be sharing their thoughts and insights into the program. It's going to be on Zoom and on Facebook, so please do join us, and looking forward to the siyum, the conclusion of that project. Now, this evening, I'm going to share with you for a few minutes my words some insights and things that I'm thinking about now before Shavuot, and then I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Rebbetzen and Mayan Emma Taylor, and she's going to share with you her words, her Divrei Torah, and then all the way from America, he has recorded us, especially for us in Belmont, a wonderful message, wonderful drasha. Rabbi Paysach Krohn, for those of you that joined us last night, he gave some words of blessing to Racheli. He has recorded us a small shir, specifically for Belmont, specifically for Shavuot, and I'm excited to bring you that also this evening. So I begin, and I want to look no further than the opening words of the Sedra that we read on Shabbat, the Sedra of Bamidbar, and it opens Vayedaber Hashem and Moshe b'Midbar Sinai. The scene is set. We are in the Midbar by Sinai, by Mount Sinai, and the sages want to discuss, why do we need to be told b'Midbar? Why in the desert? Of course Sinai's in the desert. Of course they're in the desert. Where else are they going to be? They're in the Midbar. And there's a Midrash. And the Midrash says, this is an allusion to the fact the Torah, at Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, it was given with three things: fire, with water, and with midbar, and with the desert, with the wilderness. The fire, says the Midrash, it comes from a pasuk in a previous Sedra that says that when the mountain, when the time of the giving of the Torah, the mountain, it was not only shaking, but it was smoking because of the fire. So that we can imagine the awesomeness of the event at the time in which the Jewish people received the Torah at that moment. And then the Midrash quotes for us a pasuk, a verse from Sefer Shoftim, from the book of Judges, that it says at the time of Matan Torah, the clouds were dripping with water. So we've had fire, we've had water, and now the Midrash says, our verse in our parasha, in our Sedra, the fact that it says Midbar Sinai is the third aspect, the third element, that the Torah was also given with or in the wilderness. And these three things are essential, says the Midrash, because these three elements are free. They're out there. They're in the world. Fire, water, wilderness. They exist pretty much readily available. Of course, we understand, not always, but in general terms, readily available elements for us to use, to benefit from, and they're free. And just like these elements are there and free, ready and easy or accessible to use, so too the Torah. That's the message. The Torah is just like the elements of the world are there for our use, for our privilege. It's our right to use them. So too the Torah, it's there for anyone. It's there and it's accessible. We just have to hold on to it. We have to look for it. We have to bring it in. We have to internalize it, whatever it might be. Those three things, with fire, with water, and with wilderness, as they introduce to us this idea that the Torah is there for all of us to attain, to acquire, to achieve. And it's this Midrash that I want to look at two different aspects, because these aren't plucked at random, fire, water, wilderness, and we can take some beautiful lessons from them. Because the question that I want to just explore for just a few minutes with you is, how should I receive the Torah? What's my attitude? Shavuot, tomorrow night. This is the time of Matan Torah. This is the time that we remember Bnei Yisrael were in the desert and they received the Torah. The Torah is the essence of our existence. It gives us the direction in life that we look for, guidance, a connection with Hashem, a connection with the Almighty, our Creator. So what's my attitude in terms of my own Matan Torah, my own connection with receiving Torah? And I want to take this Midrash, two different explanations. The first comes from the Sokachava of Shmuel Bornstein, also known by his work on the Torah called the Shem Mishmor. And he says it's a metaphor. Fire, water, and wilderness is a metaphor for three different things, and these three different things are there to help us acquire Torah. Fire represents passion, a burning desire. I've got to want to learn Torah. I've got to want to connect. I want to be like a bonfire. Not that I light up the world, but the aggressive nature and that passion of a fire that's raging like a big bonfire. So it's that same passion and desire I need to commit myself to earn, to acquire Torah. Water, Well, the Gemara says water actually represents humility in this context. Why? Because it says that water always flows from a high source to a low source. It flows up, down, from up, down. Why? Because that's how water works, usually, again, in most circumstances, because water is at the beck and call of gravity, of nature. And therefore, water is usually drawn downwards because that's what gravity does. Gravity brings it downwards. So if there's any kind of slant or angle, a degree of the gravity will pull water in that direction, meaning that water represents this humility, that we lower ourselves to realize, okay, I don't know it all, and therefore I've got to want to learn. So the idea for the passion, the desire to learn, the humility I have to understand I don't know it all. I need to reach out. I need to look for wisdom and for knowledge. And he says the Shem Yishmael, the wilderness, that, he says, represents the wilderness, i.e. the gulf, the space that I should have between me and the things that distracts me. Meaning, really, I'm paraphrasing, but he says it's focus. I have to be able to focus. In order to be able to learn and acquire Torah, I need to be able to focus on the learning. I need to be able to focus myself to be able to learn. And the wilderness is push everything away. If I sit down to read a good book, the best thing to do is no distractions. If I want to sit down and I want to engage in some learning, whatever it might be, but specifically in our purposes, it's Torah, I have to push away, I have to distance myself from the things that distract me, allow myself to focus. So says the Shem Yishmael, fire, water, and wilderness represent passion, humility, and focus. These three things that we need in order to receive Torah. There's another similar, and we're going to connect it, idea coming from the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon, the late, great Vilna Gaon of Eliyahu ben Shlomo Zalman. He lives in Lithuania, of course, 1720-something to 1797, I think it is. And he has an insight into a Gemara, a very well-known piece of Talmud, Bava Metzia Nuntes Amud Beis, Bava Metzia 59, second side. And it's the story of the sages arguing with Rabbi Eliezer. And what happens? They're having a particular argument. It's not our topic of discussion for today, but they're having an argument and they're discussing different explanations. What is the answer? What's this? And comes along Rabbi Eliezer and he says, this is the explanation. This is the halacha. This is the law. This is how we should understand it. And he brings proof after explanation and they reject everything that he wants to suggest. And he brings another one and they reject it. And he brings another one and they reject it. Eventually he says, listen, guys. Well, he might not have said guys. Listen, Choshev Rabbonim. Understand, I am bringing you proof after proof after proof, and you're not willing to listen to me. I'm telling you, this is the halacha. And you know what says Rabbi Eliezer? I know I'm so convinced that I'm right that the carob tree over there will prove it. And lo and behold, the carob tree moves from one place to another at quite a distance. And although most of us, if we were watching, would stand in awe to see that a person could well, he's not controlling nature, but the carob tree moved in order to prove his point, the sages replied to Rabbi Eliezer, since when do we paskan halacha? Since when do we decide in halachic discourse from a carob tree? Rabbi Eliezer puts his hands in his head, says, fine, you don't like that? He says, I'm so convinced that halacha is like this, let that stream over there prove it. And the stream flowing in one direction, in that moment, ceases to move, it flips and it flows in the opposite direction, again defying nature. Oh, a proof now from a stream. And the sages respond, since when do we paskin halacha? Since when do we decide halacha from a stream? Third attempt. Rabbi Eliezer goes, okay, I know I'm convinced that I am right. The halacha is like me. The walls of the Beis HaMedrash, the walls of the learning halls, where we go and sit and we learn and we delve deep into these ideas, the walls will prove that I'm right. And lo and behold, the walls crumble right in front of them. And what did the sages say back to Rabbi Eliezer? Since when do we paskin halacha? Since when do we decide halachic matters from the walls of the learning halls? And finally, Rabbi Eliezer says, fine. You want the ultimate proof? I'm so convinced that I am right, that I am correct, that the halacha is like me. And let heaven prove that it's like me. And lo and behold, Says the Gemara, a bas koil, a heavenly voice, comes down, and it says to the holy Talmud, holy rabbis present, why are you arguing, Rabbi Eliezer? The carob tree, the stream, the walls of the base of Medrash, everything is proving that he is right, and I say now that he is right. Turn the sages to this heavenly voice and says, Lo b'shamayim hi, quoting a verse in Torah. Lo b'shamayim hi. The heavens don't decide and paskan halacha for us down here. It's quite a chutzpah if you ask me, but understanding the sentiments behind the pasuk, the verse, the words of this holy rabbi saying you don't understand. He said, yes, you're right that maybe you can bring a proof that defies nature to prove your point. But God puts Torah in our hands. God puts Torah on earth, not in the heavens. And we can only do what we can in the best way possible to understand. And we can only do what we can do. And we can only understand, we can understand. And we will do what we can understand. So yes, maybe the carob tree moved. And maybe the stream changed directions. And the walls of the base Medrash fell down. But we can only understand how we understand and we see it. We can only use the wisdom that God has given us to understand and apply Torah. Says the Vilna Gaon. It's a fascinating story that needs a lot of discussion, not our topic today. He takes these three elements, the carob tree, the stream, and the walls of the learning halls. And he says, look, they fit sort of back into our midrash. The carob tree. Carob, don't often eat carob, but carob is a simple form of food. And the simplicity of the carob tree is the simplicity compared to the wilderness. The stream, the water, as we discussed, that's humility. The idea that we have to lower ourselves and realize we don't know it all. And then the final one, the walls of the Beis HaMedrash. This, the learning halls, we call hasmada, matmid. You know, the El Al frequent flyer program is called matmid. I saw once an article that it got voted like that year's best frequent flyer program. I don't know about you, and I've got nothing bad to say about LL in general, but their matmid program is not necessarily the easiest thing to use, and you don't get anyway. Not our point. Matmid means dedicated, right? The matmid hasmada. You know, the guy that sits in the Beis HaMedrash learning all day and all night. He's a masmid. He's a matmid. Hasmada, says the Vilna Gaon. Dedication, focus, fire. Passion, desire to want to learn. The carob tree, the stream, and the walls of the Beis HaMedrash. It's just like the fire and the water in the wilderness. If I want to acquire Torah, if I want to push myself to learn, if I want to develop a relationship with Torah, I need these three elements. I need a passion for it. I need the humility to want to learn. And I also need focus in order that I can understand everything that I am learning, in order that I can do more and more and more. There is one final element, not mentioned in the Midrash, but yet an important part, an aspect, and it's this I want to conclude. There's another Gemara that asks a very fundamental, but yet simple question that most people don't ask. You see, tomorrow night is Tikkun Leil. What's Tikkun Leil? Tikkun Leil is the first night of Shavuot. As the sun sets to the wee hours of the morning, Jewish people all over the world will stay up all night to learn Torah. And yes, we could just simply say, why do we learn Torah all night? Because this is the festival in which we commemorate the giving of the Torah. However, that's not necessarily the reason that we stay up all night. We're told what happened, that Bnei Yisrael fell asleep. They were sleeping, and they fell asleep, and therefore Moshe had to go around and wake them up. What are you sleeping for? How dare you slumber? How dare you fall asleep where God is about to appear to us and give us Torah, and you're having a shluv mapitom? So we fix the fact that they fell asleep by staying up. That's the idea behind Tikkun Leil. The Gemara Megillah asks a question: why on earth were they sleeping? How is this possible? We talk about the giving of the Torah like a chuppah, like a chosin and kala, like a bride and the groom coming together. Who sleeps in the morning of the wedding? Who has a lie-in? Who's not waking up early, thinking about it, and the anticipation and the excitement for the hair and the photographer, etc., etc.? I'm talking about from an emotional perspective. Who's schluffing, who's sleeping in such a situation? How could it be, says the Gemara, that they were asleep at the night of Kabbalah Torah, the receiving of Torah? What's the answer? So we have to understand it as follows. They spent 3 days preparing. In fact, we're in those 3 days now. Shoshes Yemei Hagbala, the 3 days of preparation to receive Torah. Of course they were preparing. Of course they weren't ready to go to bed. Of course they weren't going to miss their opportunity. But all that hachana, all that preparation, and what happens? God sends them to sleep to teach a very valuable lesson. We have to put effort into receiving Torah. But don't think that when you receive Torah, it's always as a direct relationship with the effort that you put in there and then. Because there's always an element that you can't do. And we call it Aramaic language, we call it siyata dishmaya. Siyata, help, dishmaya, from the heavens. And in everything that we do, we rely upon in life, siyata dishmaya, help from heaven. Yes, we've got to put immense amounts of effort into learning, but it's only through siyata dishmaya. It's only through the hand of God guiding us, allowing us to understand, granting us with wisdom. It's that fourth element that's not mentioned in the Midrash that's so essential, it's so important, and without it we would never understand Torah. Because our intellect can only take us so far. Our fire and passion can only take us so far. Our focus can only take us so far. We need that last, all-important part. We need that siyata dishmaya. We need that help from heaven. So God takes away the siyata dishmaya. He takes away the fact they prepared in order that they would have to realize if you receive Torah, it has to be that fourth element. It's that connecting force. You come this far and God helps with the rest. That's a lesson for life, but it's most certainly a lesson for Shavuot and receiving of Torah. So what have we said? We spoke about the Midrash that says that the Torah is given with fire, with water, and with wilderness. The passion, desire that we need to have for Torah. The intellect and the humility that we must have in order to learn and to understand. And the focus to be able to direct our efforts and our energy and determination to receive Torah. We put all that together, we've done our part. We just have to realize that this and every aspect of our life, we need help from heaven to be able to understand and to be able to guide us in everything that we do. That's what I'm thinking now as we approach Zman Matan Toratelu, the time in which we were given this precious gift. We were given the connecting force for us to be able to not only understand our part in this world, but also have a relationship with the Almighty. May this Shavuot, tomorrow night, grant us the power, the connection to be able to engage with Torah, engage with learning, all the opportunities available to us. Let us grasp them. Let us help them to inspire us, give us fulfillment and meaning in Be'ezrat Hashem. Give us an understanding that will mean something so much to us, that it will give us something to take us through, not just this festival, not just this COVID crisis, but something that is fundamental to how we live our lives. Be'ezrat Hashem, it should be a blessing-filled Yontif. That's it from me. It's now my great honor to introduce Rebbetzen, Mayan, Emma Taylor, who definitely, if you're tuning in from Belmont, as I'm sure most of you are, does not need an introduction. You've known her far longer than you have known me. Of course, Ni Hart, Emma Hart, and I'm looking forward now for her to share with us her Divrei Torah for Shavuot. Thank you, Emma, and thank you for listening. Please stay tuned as we continue now.
Hi everyone in Belmont. Thank you so much to Rabbi Levene for asking me to be part of this lovely Shavuot program virtually. Sending lots of good wishes to everyone. Hope everyone is healthy and well. So today I want to explore a little bit about Megillah Ruth. So Ruth is a Megillah that we read on Shavuot. And I think she's a character that is not explored as much as other female heroines that we have in the biblical canon, for example, Esther or Miriam. And she's not always someone who we know so much about. We know that, yes, she converted and yes, she gave up everything to become a Jew, which is why we read her on Shavuot. But I think that there are lots of little messages that we can take away from her character that we can apply to our lives today. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the source sheet. Bear with me for a moment. There we go. Okay, so Ruth is called many things in the text. She is called a Moabite. She's called a woman. She's called a daughter-in-law. And I think the most famous or the nicest phrase that that's bestowed on her is the phrase that we see in source number 1 over here, when Boaz calls her an Eshet Chayil, which in this translation on Safari, I think they translate it as a fine woman. Now, Eshet Chayil, this makes us think about the song that we sing every Friday night to the woman of the house, when we talk about all the wonderful qualities of this woman. And again, if you look at different Siddurim, they have different translations of what the word Eshet Chayil really means, a woman of valor, or all different kinds of translations. So we're going to explore about what this word Eshet Chayil, or this phrase, means and how it relates to Ruth as a person. So if you want to understand about really what this word means, we have to look at another time in the Torah when the word Chayil is used for us to understand what it means and how it relates to Ruth. So if you look at the second source over here, this is the story of when Moshe was choosing people to help to lead the Jewish people. And we're told that Moshe chose Anshe Chayil, which is translated here as capable men, to help lead the people. And the commentators explain that here the word Chayil refers to financial success. They were professional, they were successful in business, they were the top level of society, and they were the people that he chose. If we think about it, that doesn't relate to Ruth. That Ruth we know is someone who had nothing. She had loads of money. She was a princess in Moab, and then she left it all to become a Jew. So how can it be that she was this understanding of a financially successful person relates to Ruth? And what the Ibn Ezra, the Spanish commentator, explains is that it's not talking about financial success, i.e. being rich. It's talking about financial savviness, about having financial acumen. How do we know this refers to Ruth? Ruth was someone that came with nothing. She left her whole materialistic life to have nothing. And she didn't wallow. She didn't wallow in self-pity. She didn't just wait around for God to save her because I've now turned to God. God, must help me. She got up and she did something. She was proactive. She had this financial independence that allowed her to say, you know what? I have to help myself. I have to help myself and my mother-in-law. I'm going to go to the field. And we know in the story that she goes literally on her hands and knees and picks up the wheat from the floor, which is something quite debasing for someone of her stature. And she has, which in Hebrew we call hishtadlut. She did her own, she got up and did it. She didn't wait around for handouts. She didn't wait around for other people. She got up and she was proactive in what she did. And this is why we're told here that Boaz calls her an Eshet Chayil, because this is something that he saw in her as a potential future partner that was very, very attractive. Boaz at the time was the leader of the Jewish people. He was the judge. And he needs a wife who was going to be able to stand by him, but not just grab onto him and need him for everything. He needed a wife that could stand next to him and could be independent, that could do things for herself. And this was a characteristic of Ruth that he really, really liked, and something that we see that he praised her for. Now, another understanding of this word chayil is makes us think of the word chayal, which in Hebrew is a soldier. We'll talk about the chayalim of the Israeli army. So how is a soldier in any way comparable to a wife or an Eshet Chayil or Ruth? What's the connection? So again, the commentators explain that the word chayil here talks about courage. Just like a soldier is courageous, Ruth was courageous. Now, what was she so courageous about? We're told that Ruth did something that was quite vulnerable. She made herself quite vulnerable, and in that way she was courageous. Not that she went and fought anybody like soldiers do, but she gave of herself and was courageous in that way. Now, what did she do? A bit further down we can see over here. This is the story over here of when Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, tells her, you know what you need to do? You need to go and basically seduce Boaz. You need to go and make him your husband. So what you need to do is, and it's written in bold, v'sacht, v'samt, and you should bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor. Basically, you need to go and seduce him. You need to go and make yourself look beautiful so that he will want to be your husband, which the commentators explain was a very courageous thing to do. It was very courageous to let herself be exposed in this way. And that's why, again, she's referred to as this Ishet Chaya, a woman of courage. But also, and I think this point is missed out a lot in when we look at Ruth. We see another side of her in this whole episode. If you look at the next source down, which is 3 verses later in the text, it tells us what Ruth did. It says, she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed, which actually is the complete reversal of what Ruth told her to do. If you look up here, Ruth says, go down to the threshing floor last, get dressed first and go down last. Whereas here it says, she went down first to the threshing floor, and then she did just as her mother-in-law had said, i.e. she got dressed, made herself look pretty, put on her makeup and her jewelry, etc. So what was this all about? Why is there this change of the order? And why does it specifically say she did just as her mother-in-law had said? And I think the answer is that she understood, well, Rashi actually brings us down over here, that she understood that if she was going to walk around the town dressed to the nines with all her makeup on and all her jewelry and looking very seductive, people may look at Boaz and not think very favorably of him. That who's going to visit Boaz in the middle of the night? She was worried, and Rashi says specifically in the text that she was worried that people would think that she was a harlot, that she was a prostitute. And she was so conscious of the fact that Boaz was this leader of the Jewish people that she did not want anyone to think badly of him. She didn't want anyone to think badly of her potential future husband, of this leader of the Jewish people. She had such sensitivity to him and to his needs and to what people may think of him that she turned around, that she went in her normal clothes, she went down to the threshing floor to where Boaz was, and only when he was there and that no one else could see her, then she got dressed and made herself look beautiful. But what's so interesting is that it doesn't say that she ignored her mother-in-law. No, she then did everything her mother-in-law had said. I think this again shows compassion and kindness that is the personification of what Ruth is all about. Ruth could have easily have said to her mother-in-law, Naomi, what are you talking about? I'm not going to go walking around like a prostitute down right around town. I'm not going to go do this. And she could have shouted at her, told her she was being ridiculous. I'm not listening to you. But she didn't. She kept her mouth shut. She did the right thing. She went to the threshing floor. And then she did exactly what her mother-in-law told her to do. She acted with such compassion towards her mother-in-law's feelings. And she didn't really need to, if you think about it. Her mother-in-law was never amazingly pleasant to her. It wasn't as if she owed her mother-in-law anything. But she was so sensitive and so compassionate to her mother-in-law that she would be offended by not listening to her. That it specifically says that she went down and then she did everything her mother-in-law asked. Again, this shows such amazing qualities of Ruth. Number one, that she was very courageous. Number two, that she had such compassion and kindness for other people when she didn't always need to be. She didn't always need to be that kind of person. And I think this is also something very interesting about Ruth, is that we're told that the whole of the Megillat Ruth is there to teach us only about kindness. We read Megillat Ruth on Shavuot to teach us about being kind. And if you think about it, it's very strange because Ruth teaches us about lots of things. Ruth teaches us about the laws of conversion, teaches us about the laws of marriage, teaches us about the laws of modesty, when Ruth bent down to pick up the wheat, all these different things it teaches us. And yes, it also teaches us to be kind. But why does the Midrash specifically say that we are reading this book to teach us about being kind? And I think part of the reason is this, is that it is much easier to be kind to people who we don't live with. It is much easier to be kind to people who we see sporadically, people that we're not living with on a day-to-day basis, people who are not necessarily in our family, people who may thank us for what we do. The hardest kindness is when we do kindness without any thanks, when we just do things for other people because it's the right thing to do. And Ruth here is teaching us about true kindness. She's teaching us about being kind to people that sometimes the hardest to be kind to, people that are not going to say thank you. Naomi does not say thank you to Ruth for listening to her. She just accepts that she's going to do it. That's the way that it should be. And this teaches us an amazing aspect of being kind. Yes, we should spend time being kind to other people. We should spend our time, volunteering for other people and being good to people outside of our home. But what this situation, what this story is teaching us, especially given the circumstances that we're in now, when we're living with people in this quarantine period, we're with people all day, every day, and we don't see other people. We only see our family. And we have to take a message from Ruth and understand that these are the people that are not going to necessarily say thank you to us all the time for doing all these things for them. These are the people that deserve our kindness the most. People who are not necessarily who are going to say thank you back to us. And again, also, I think another reason why kindness is such an important part of this whole Megillah, of this whole thing, is that compared to other women within Jewish literature, Ruth is someone, as I said at the beginning, who is not necessarily known so much about. Miriam, for example, is someone who we know was standing up for the Jewish women. She was leading them. She was dancing with tambourines. She was very proactive. She was very loud, I would say, very, very loud. Whereas Ruth is someone, the complete opposite. In fact, the commentators often call her an enabler. They don't call her a mover and shaker like Miriam was, or even Esther was. She was someone who was an enabler. She enabled other people to be successful. She enabled other people to be happy, to get on with their lives, like Naomi, like Boaz. And she didn't always get the credit for it, but she was happy to be doing things in the background because she realized that was her role. That was what she was doing. But what is so amazing is that even with being in the background, she managed to affect so much change. We know that when Ruth and Naomi came back to the Jewish people, they came back to a Jewish nation that was not necessarily so kind, not necessarily such a good people. And we even know this by the fact that their leader, who was Elimelech and Naomi at the time, the leaders of the Jewish people, they left when the famine came because they did not want people knocking on their door saying, please help us and give us charity. That was the nature of the Jewish people at the time. They weren't a very giving nation. So much so that we're told that Yehoshua, the leader, died, and the people didn't even give him a proper burial. They weren't even interested. They were so self-centered, so worried about their own lives that they couldn't look at anyone else. And yet by the end of the story, by the end of the Megillah, we see there's been a change, there's been a shift. The Jewish nation has come back to the kindness that they always had deep down. And we're told, the Mefarshim, the commentators explain, the reason for this is because of Ruth. Because of Ruth's shining example of true kindness, of being kind to those around her, and not shouting from the rooftops, not asking for praise, not asking for thanks. That affected so many people, like the ripple effect, right? First, there's a famous poem, I think, if you want to change the whole world, first start with yourself, and then that will help your family, and it goes like a whole ripple. And that's what she did. She was somebody who, through her kindness, through her sensitivity, and through her compassion, she affected so much change. And I just want to go back again, just before we end, to this idea of Eshet Chayil. So we spoke at the beginning that Boaz called Ruth and Eshet Chayil a woman of valor. And we said that we say this poem on Friday night. Now, for another time, but the different stanzas within Eshet Chayil, they actually relate to different women. And this verse over here, the last line over here, is one of the verses that relates very much to Ruth. It says, Sheka ha'chein ve'hevel hayofi. Grace is deceptive, beauty is illusory. It is for her fear of the Lord that a woman is to be praised. This refers to Ruth, I think, for two reasons. And on this, we're going to end just because of time. First of all, we know that Ruth left everything to become a Jew. She understood that materialism was worthless, that beauty, grace, all these things, that the materialistic things that we possess is worthless, because after 120 years, that's not the things that we can take with us. We can only take with the good things that we do, the kindness that we see that Ruth actually personifies, and our connection to God, our connection to our religion, and our connection to our heritage. That's the only things that we can take with us. And therefore, on a superficial reading of this verse, we could say that yes, this refers to Ruth because she gave everything up. She gave up materialism in order to have a life connected to Judaism. But also, I think another understanding of it is that when it talks about appearance is false, it talks about being true to yourself. It talks about being true to the person that you are, not trying to be like everybody else, sticking with what you're good at, the path that you were created to follow. I think here we see again, Ruth was somebody who was not someone who was going to stand up and give big speeches and was going to, affect change in this big, loud, dramatic way. She knew her role in life. She knew that her role was to support other people, to be an enabler, to be somebody who was there to be the backbone of society, someone that wasn't always going to get all the praise. But yet she was able to affect change. She was able to do so much good with the tools that God had given her. And she realized that, hey, grace is deceptive, beauty is illusory. I don't need to be like everyone else. I don't need to be the center of attention. I don't need to follow the path of other people. I need to be true to myself, and only then will I be effective. And I think this, again, is a very important message for us going into Shavuot. There are so many things we can take away from Ruth as a person and the Megillah, and I think this is a very important one here. Is that Shavuot is a time when we have to have a reconnection with God. We have to take a step back and we re-accept the Torah ourselves as we hear it on Shavuot. This year, unfortunately, we'll be hearing it in shul, but we can read it for ourselves. And a part of reading the Torah and a part of understanding, accepting the Torah, is accepting that each and every one of us, just like each letter of the Torah is different and special and is there for a reason, so too are we. Each of us is there for a very specific reason. And we don't have to look at the other letters around us. We shouldn't be looking at other people. We only have to be focused on our own strengths, on what we are good at, just like Ruth did. And only when we are banish the thoughts of everybody else and we understand that all these other things are worthless, just focus on me, only then will we become a woman or a man who can be praised, who can be effective, and who can affect change for ourselves and for everybody else. And on that note, I would like to wish everyone a Chag Sameach, a wonderful, wonderful Yom Tov, and thank you again for having me.
Wow, thank you so much, Emma, for that insight, for your beautiful words. And on behalf of everyone here in Belmont, we appreciate your time and hope you, Sam, and all the Rabbi Sam, and all the kids have a wonderful Yom Tov. And as soon as all this is finished, you have to come back and visit us very, very soon. Thank you once again. Now, by the power of technology, hopefully, we're going to have our own special talk from Rabbi Paysach Krohn. He made an appearance last night, I think I said before, at the Bas Mitzvah. Rabbi Krohn is a Moyle by trade, but also you should realize he travels the world. Literally probably one of the most well-known faces internationally, speaks all over the world, has written many, many books on a wonderful range of topics. He's got the Maggid series. If you want some really beautiful, inspiring, uplifting stories, just go the Maggid Speaks or Tales of a Maggid, the Art Scroll series that you can get in any Jewish bookshop. Really, really fantastic stuff. It's a big privilege for us to have Rabbi Krohn with us. Some of you may remember he came last year, or the week of Shavuot. He was staying in Stamford for Shabbos, and he came to us, and we had a wonderful breakfast with him on the Sunday morning in the run-up to Shavuot. And I reached out to him and I said, Rabbi Krohn, would you give us the honor once again in spending some time with us in our community in the run-up to Shavuot? So he said, of course I will, and he has recorded us the following drasha, and it's now going to be my honor to introduce him. I just have to click 2 or 3 buttons, and hopefully, by the power of technology, this should happen right about now. There he is. I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll come back at the end and introducing to you Rabbi Paysach.
It is such a great honor for me to be able to speak in the presence of Rabbi Mark Levene. I remember so well last year when I had the opportunity to speak in your wonderful, wonderful Belmont synagogue. I remember we had a wonderful breakfast on a very, very sunny morning, and all of you were just so kind and so receptive to me. If you recall, we were speaking about Yom Yerushalayim, and it was just a very special morning. And I'll tell you the truth, most of the videos that I make these days, I make them indoors. But because I remember that sunny atmosphere and that sunny morning, I just wanted to replicate it in some way. And so I am doing this here in my backyard. And I hope that it'll be wonderful and inspirational to all of you. You know, the Torah tells us that when the Jews were about to come to Har Sinai and they rested there, the Torah uses an expression that is a little bit unusual. We're talking now about 600,000 men. And if you count the women and the children, there were over 1 million people at Har Sinai. And it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael. Klal Yisrael rested there. Now, it should have said Vayachanu in the plural, but yet it says Vayichan. They rested. It seems like that's in the singular. And Rashi picks up on it. And Rashi, one of the greatest commentaries on the Chumash, tells us what the Gemara teaches us. The reason that it's singular is it was because Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad. That when the Jews came to Har Sinai, the only way that they would be able to receive the Torah was if they were united as one. And that's why instead of saying Vayachanu in the plural, they rested, it says Vayichan, as if they rested as one. Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad. And I think there's a great lesson here because the Jews were not able to accept the Torah as individuals. They accepted it as a community. And did you ever think about this? That in the word community, you have the word unity. And that's the ideal of every community, that there should be unity. So you might ask, why does it have to be that the Torah is accepted as a community, as a union of Jews together? And I'll tell you why. You all know that there are 613 mitzvahs, but some of the mitzvahs, there's really, we can't do all of them. In other words, if you're not a Kohen, you cannot do those mitzvahs that have to do with the Beis HaMikdash. And if you don't live in Eretz Yisrael, you cannot do those mitzvahs that have to be done in Israel. And so how could each and every one of us, in a sense, fulfill those 613 mitzvahs? It's only if we're a community and we care for each other and we give encouragement to the Kohen and we give encouragement to the people in Eretz Yisrael and we support them and we help them. And if we do that, so then we have, in a sense, a portion of the reward or a portion of the mitzvah that they're doing because they're able to do it because we care for them and they feel encouraged by that. And so therefore it is only when we are a community and that we have unity that all the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah can be performed. And so therefore I think that as we get to Shavuot and as we get to Kabbalah Torah, we have to make a very strong effort to be a united people, to care for each other, to be Ke'ish echad u'b'leiv echad. And so I want to share with you a beautiful story that happened just 2 weeks ago. Now, some of you may know that I am a male. Of course, a male is somebody who does brisson on little boys. And it's quite a challenge to do them these days when everybody is quarantined. The brisson that are done today, of course, are no longer done in synagogues. They're done in private homes. Very, very few people are allowed to be there, certainly not in the room where the bris is. And usually, the way I do it, I try to have the father is the sandik. He's the one who's holding the baby during the bris. So we minimize how many people are actually touching the child. Well, about 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a fellow, and he gets on the phone and he tells me that he and his wife on the phone, and they say, Rabbi Krohn, can we ask you something? We're both very sad. I said, why are you sad? What happened? And they tell me that they have been married for a number of years, 4 years, and they don't have any children. And they said, it's very difficult for us. But we heard recently from some great rabbis that if we would pay for a bris, then that merit, the fact that we pay for a mitzvah that really is not ours, and Hashem sees that, then he would reward us with having our own child. I said, I once heard that as well. So he said, Rabbi, do you have a bris coming up? Maybe you could ask the father if we could pay for the bris, and that would be a schus, that would be a merit, so that we should be able to have children. I was so moved by that. I said, listen, I do have a bris coming up on Tuesday morning, and I have to call the father in advance. I just can't spring it on him at the bris itself, to tell him that somebody else wants to pay for this. So I called the father and I said, there's a young couple, Nebuch, they married a number of years, they don't have children. They would like to pay for the bris, so it should be a merit that they would be able to have their own child. Well, he said, Rabbi Krohn, isn't the law that a father is supposed to do the mitzvah of the bris? Of course, if he can't do it himself, he hires the male, but that's his mitzvah. I don't want to give away that mitzvah. I said, I understand, but I'll tell you what. Why don't you just pay part of the bris? You pay for part of my fee, let's say $25, and let him pay the rest. You see, in America, a male usually has a fee, so let him pay most of it. You'll pay part of it. You'll have a part of the mitzvah. He'll have a part of the mitzvah. And hopefully that'll be a merit and a schus for him. He said, okay, I want to call my rabbi. I just want to check it out. And that's what he did. And he calls me back an hour later. He says, you know what the rabbi said? That would be fine. And so I called back the fellow. I told him, okay, you're going to pay most of it. He'll pay $25. And that's what we did. Tuesday morning, right after the bris, listen to this. You won't believe it. I went over to the father and I said to him, you only have to pay me $25 because that other fellow is going to pay the rest. And he says, Rabbi, let me tell you what my wife and I decided. We decided that the balance of the money that we were going to give you, we are going to give that to charity. So it should be a schus and a merit for that couple that they should be have a child. I tell you, I almost started crying when he told it to me. What a beautiful gesture. What a way of ke'ish echad b'lev echad. He doesn't even know that couple. He never heard of that couple until a couple days before when I called him about it. And yet he's willing to give a sizable amount of money to charity so that that couple who he doesn't even know about should have a child. That's unity. That's a community. That's ke'ish echad b'lev echad. And I think that that's how we all have to become. Again, as we approach Shavuot, as we approach Kabbalas HaTorah, we have to act in certain ways that shows that we are united and that we love and that we care for each other. But I want to tell you another thing that I think is so important as we approach the days of Shavuot and the days of Kabbalas HaTorah, receiving the Torah. Many of you certainly know that on Shavuot itself, we read the book, the Sefer of Ruth. I would suggest, if you still have time, that you should really read it if you can and learn it in advance so that when we do read it on Ruth, on Shavuot, you'll be able to gain so much from it because you will have been prepared. And I'll tell you the truth, that's what I'm doing. I'm learning it now with one of my grandsons. We learn almost every single day. One of the wonderful books, and I'm sure, hopefully, at least you can get it if the bookstores are open or you could order it. The Art Scroll on Rus is fabulous. It gives you a great understanding of the lessons that we can learn from Rus. But I want to tell you a personal lesson that I have learned from it that I think is absolutely incredible. Most of you know the story. There was a man, his name was Elimelech, and Elimelech had a wife, and her name was Naomi. They were very, very wealthy, and they lived in Eretz Yisrael. And then, unfortunately, there was a famine, there was a hunger, and many, many people were poverty stricken. And they came to Elimelech that he should support them. But he got tired of it. And he realized, he thought anyway, that if he has to continue supporting all these people, he's going to have nothing left for himself. That's what he thought. Well, it wasn't right what he did. And Hashem was very angry because he picked up with his family, his wife and his two sons, and they left. and they went to a place called Mayav, which was outside Eretz Yisrael. Hashem was very angry at Elimelech. How do you dare do that? I gave you money, and you're supposed to take your money and help other Jews, and you don't do that? Unfortunately, Elimelech and his two sons died. Now, Naomi was left with two daughters in law. One of them, her name was Arpa, the other was Rus. Now, Naomi fell from grace. She was not wealthy anymore. She was from a royal family, but now she had nothing. And she says to her two daughters in law, to Naomi, she says to Orpah and to Rus, she says, my dear daughters in law, go, don't stay with me. I don't have anything. I'm poverty stricken. You're young. You could build your lives. You'll get married. Don't stay with me. I can't have a child anymore that will marry you. So go. And both of them said, no, Ma, we want to stay with you. And she kept on pleading with them. She said, go. And finally, Orpah said, okay. And listen how the verse says it. And I want to read it to you because I think there's something very important there. The pasuk is in chapter 1, verse 14, Aleph Yudalet. And it tells us, Vatishak Orpah. Orpah kissed, she kissed her mother-in-law, Naomi. She kissed her goodbye. Rus Dovkaba. And Rus attached herself to her mother-in-law. In other words, Orpah said, okay, you want me to go? I'll go. And they kissed goodbye. But Rus attached herself. Rus attached herself and remained with her mother-in-law, Naomi. Now, they went back to Eretz Yisrael together. One of the most moving expressions and verses in the entire Tanakh is what Ruth says to Naomi. She says, wherever you go, I go. Your nation is my nation. Where you die, I'll die. Your God is my God. She's not leaving. They were attached to each other. And they came back to Israel. Now listen to this. If you never heard what I'm about to tell you, you will be amazed. Many of you know that later on, in 3 generations, there was a battle between King David, between David HaMelech, and Goliath. Goliath was a giant. And everybody thought that Goliath for sure would annihilate David. They were on the battlefield. Now, listen to this. Here's this surprising fact if you don't know this. Goliath, the giant, he was a descendant of Orpah. That Orpah who had kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, he was a great-great-grandson of Orpah. David HaMelech was a great-great-grandson of Rus. Now listen to this. They're standing on the battlefield, and the Gemara in Saita 42b, Mem Beis Amud Beis, tells us, as they're standing on the battlefield, a voice comes from heaven. And listen to this poetic expression that came from heaven as these two are about to begin a battle. The expression was, Yovoyu b'nei hanashuka. Let that son of the one who kissed, that's referring to Goliath, who is the descendant of Orpah, that son of the one who kissed, let him fall into the hands of the one who attached. That's David HaMelech. King David was a descendant of Rus. So the one who kissed is going to fall into the hands of the one who attached. And of course, we know the story. David was able to kill Goliath. But I think there's a great lesson here. There are 2 descriptions, kissing and attaching. And you know something? Kissing is not enough. And if somebody comes to shul and they kiss the siddur, they kiss the chumash, they kiss the Torah, that's lip service. That's not enough. One has to be attached to the mitzvahs of the Torah. One has to be attached to the laws that are written in the chumash and what the siddur is telling us, how we connect to Hashem. And that's the lesson as we approach Kabbalah Satira and as we approach Shavuot. We each have to take in our own hearts and in our own minds, take a mitzvah. There are so many mitzvahs. Take a mitzvah and become attached to it so that you become identified with this mitzvah. And I'll give you some examples. because I know certain people who have become so outstanding in certain mitzvahs that they do that they become inseparable. For example, in our neighborhood here in Queens, there's someone who is so involved with Hatzalah. All of you know what Hatzalah is, the Jewish Medical Service. Everybody knows that his business is secondary to what he does for Hatzalah. He's a fabulous individual. He has saved so many lives and helped so many children. And his wife accompanies, she doesn't accompany him on the trips that he takes, but she supports this. And so this is their mitzvah. And his father was like that, and his brothers are like that. And when you mention this family's name here in Queens, everybody will say, that's Mr. Hatzalah. Now, for example, up in Muncie, which is, I would say maybe 40 miles from here, there's a fellow who is so involved in Tomchei Shabbos. I'm sure that you have some type of organization in England that is like Tomchei Shabbos. Tomchei Shabbos helps those people who don't have food for Shabbos. And there are people who deliver packages to them on Thursday. But who's organizing this? So I know a fellow in Muncie who is so incredible with Tomchei Shabbos. It is just amazing. He gets the food. He makes sure that he gets it for a reasonable price. He sets up the drivers. He gets people to pack the packages. He gets people to deliver. He makes sure that those that are delivering are sensitive. And many times he'll send them to people that they don't know so nobody's embarrassed. You mention his name to anybody, and they'll say, that's Mr. Tomchei Shabbos. And you know something? One more example. There's a family in Borough Park. Everybody knows their name. They are exceptional in Hachnos Asorchim, which means having guests. And I'll tell you somebody who was like that. He just moved to Israel, but he was in Stamford Hill. His name was Jackie Levinson. I don't know if any of you ever heard his name, but I was in his house, in Mr. and Mrs. Levinson's home. You would not believe those people who come to collect from Israel, the Meshalachim, they would park themselves in that home and they would study there. They would be there throughout the day. The dining room was like a dormitory almost. It was amazing. And I was in their kitchen. They had institutional pots. She was always cooking meats and chickens and soup. It was amazing. And people would stay there for weeks on end. So what happened was one night, they're all sitting around together. And, nobody knows each other because everybody's, some here for 5 days, one here for 1 week, 2 weeks. Listen to this. You won't believe it. What happened was one fella says to the other, he says, how long are you here? He says, well, I'm here 4 days. Another guy says, well, I'm here 2 weeks. And somebody turns to Jackie Levinson. He didn't know who he was. He was the owner of the house. And he said, how long are you here? He says, I'm here 30 years. He said, oh, that's already a chutzpah. Now, of course, it's hysterical because he didn't realize that Jackie Levinson is the one who's supporting him. But the point is, that family is personified by Hachnosas Orchin. And that's what we have to do as we prepare for Shavuos. We have to take a mitzvah and become attached to it. Lip service is not really enough. So let's review everything that we said, and then we'll end just with a beautiful thought. Let's remember, Rabbi Mark Levene is just so warm and wonderful. That's the first thing. The second thing is I loved being with you last year in Belmont, that great breakfast. Let's remember, Ki'ish echad u'belev echad. We have to be as one. Community has the word unity because no Jew can do all the mitzvahs. Not everybody's a Kohen and not everybody lives in Israel. But if we support these people and we're friendly with these people and we encourage, then we have a portion of the mitzvahs that they are doing. Let's remember that beautiful story about the fellow who not only paid for the bris, but what the other father did. And he gave the money for charity so that that other person should be able to have the schus of having a child. Let's remember what we learned. Lip service is not enough. That which Orpah did to Naomi, Vatishach, she just kissed her. That's not enough. You got to be attached. And that's why years later, Goliath fell into the hands of David. Goliath, the son of the one who kissed, fell into the hands of the one who attached. And now finally, I just want to end with this thing, which I think you'll never forget. We've spoken about being united. My father, Olam Shalom, I don't know where he got this from, but he once told me, and he would say this many times at Sheva Brachas. He said the word united and the word untied, if you write it out on a piece of paper, you will see They are spelled with the exact same letters, united and untied. The only difference is where you put the I. You put the I in the right place, then a community is united. A synagogue is united. People are united. Klal Yisrael is united. But if you put it in the wrong place, oh, chas v'shalom, it's untied. Let's make a commitment. Ki'ish echad b'lev echad, we will be united. We will attach ourselves to mitzvahs, and that's how we'll prepare for the great holiday of Shavuot. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for listening.
Wow, that was very powerful. Thank you so much, Rabbi Krohn, for those beautiful words. We really appreciate your time. And friends, the evening is coming to a close. I just want to thank you all for joining us. We had around 80 people watching. I know Facebook seems to be less people. YouTube seems to be many more people. It's usually the other way around. What can you do? Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Hopefully, 3 different speakers with 3 different messages, and hopefully there was something for everyone, if not all of it for everyone, which is wonderful as well. Anyone that's watching not in Belmont, I hope you have a Chag Sameach. If you're in Belmont, or anyone really, can join us tomorrow at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We'll be doing Yizka amongst 1 or 2 other things as well. So please do join us. The link, as usual, will come out tomorrow morning if you haven't got it already, with all the other information that you need. I wish everyone a Chag Sameach, a blessing-filled Yontif, and please God, we should be able to see each other very, very soon. Thank you for watching, and Erev Tov, Laila Tov, and Bezrat Hashem, will see you soon. Take care, all the best.